This is a different kind of a master's presentation, I think, than most, because it's interspersed, interlaced, actually woven into it is a lot of art and a lot of live music, and so it's like, as Marshall McLuhan said, the medium is the message. The idea of artistically creating our lives. We wanted this event itself to actually exemplify that. So my own middle passage journey, and that's a Jungian term, middle passage, really had to do with reclaiming my life as a musician. And so that's part of it too. And I'm very, very honored to be joined by my good friends Richard Dirlam and Ed Turley, who will be joining me for the musical parts of what we're doing. We're hoping too that not only, I've had a chance to greet you, but you can greet each other and meet somebody new. That's always a good thing to do in an event like this. People that would come to an event like this are probably already your friends that you just haven't gotten to know very well yet. So please take that opportunity if you can. So I wrote this first piece, Evening Begins, because it's a piece about transition, about changing kind of from one mood to the other, like maybe you're just get off work and now the rest of the evening is yours. So it's a transition piece of transitioning, and it's part of a collection of 5 evening pieces for piano, which Ed is doing 3 of them this evening. And I wrote it with Ed in mind, and so with that, I will, as we settle, we'll think about transitioning into the program with Ed playing Evening Begins. So why this topic? Why might it be a benefit for you in your own life? So there's a few basic things of just the word artistically, and it implies an inner journey of discovery, a journey to discover our own intrinsic truths that are unique to us and no one else. Artistically also implies intentionality, the idea that we're really not just having a nebulous idea of our lives, but we're actually having a lot of intent. What do we really want? What makes sense for us? What makes sense for us in the world and for the benefit of others? And then finally, aesthetics. The idea that if we create a life that has beauty and truth, because those two go together so much of the time, that it really makes more sense than to have our lives be created without being informed by the aesthetics of truth and beauty. So our lives can be like works of art. And then why Adler and Jung? Both Adler and both Jung really deeply explored how we as individuals operate within the context of society and our social connections with each other. And their ideas of creating our lives in an intentional way is really, really part of what they talk about. And our authenticity is again based upon our unique individuality. Carl Jung, in addition to his life as an author and lecturer, he was also just a wonderful visual artist. Surprisingly, he, at the time he was alive, and his family, for another 6 decades later, were concerned that his life as an artist, his artistry, would somehow change people's perception of all that he did in the psychological field. So basically, it was kept under wraps. This work, the Red Book is called, in which most of his art is there for all to see, was not available other than a few close family members for 60 years after he died. And finally, the family was convinced to publish it. And most of the images that we will see tonight are from Carl Jung's actual artwork. Adler also had an artistic life. He created parent and children's clinics in Germany between the 2 world wars. He also took the lead in creating the field of individual psychology. And additionally, he was a singer, and he was engaged in music as a hobby. So those two powerfully inform, for me, how we can artistically create our lives. How and why we might benefit is we can learn to know ourselves as well as other people in fresh, unforeseen, and surprising ways. We can become more balanced people also by accepting and integrating those hidden aspects of ourselves, and especially those avoided and unwanted parts of ourselves, the parts that might have been exiled or left behind for all kinds of reasons. The idea is to find them and reincorporate them. And as we do, we can not only accept ourselves more, but we can accept others, because if we can do that process with ourselves, we can begin to accept the parts of others that at first we might find more difficult or challenging. And as we reclaim our power to intentionally reinvent and recreate our lives in alignment with our own uniqueness and our deeper sense of life purpose, we have much more to contribute to everyone else. So ultimately, that's what it's about. It's about self-discovery and reflection. And then what do we do with it? Intentionally doing something with it that really makes some sense, not only for our own lives, but for the lives of all the lives whose life our life touches. And so, Alfred Adler to begin with. Goal orientation versus instinctual drives. He postulated that inferiorities that we have, including bodies that maybe don't look as perfect as we wish they did, organ inferiority, like maybe we were born with some things that are not quite right with our organs, eyesight, whatever it might be. Abnormal size, people that are more small, more big, anything at all, traumas maybe that we had during our development, anything that we have. Adler said it's less relevant that we have these things. What's more relevant is how do we respond to them. So for Adler, it was our volition, our striving, and our goal orientation that is paramount. And his stance was in contrast to Freud's. But Freud had a hard time with this sort of thing. He felt that instinctual drives were the primary determinants of behavior, and Adler thought differently. He thought it was more of our own volition. So what happens is we assign meanings, and it's a creative process. Whatever happens to us, we assign a meaning to it when we're often very young. It's not our hereditary givens, environments, as we said, or even behaviors of others towards us per se, but rather our creative assignment of meaning to all of our experiences that really matters. The fundamental assignment of meaning can and does happen in our formative years. Adler believed by age 6, a great deal of our way of interpreting how our lives are and what things mean to us was well in place. But these fundamental assignments of meaning can be changed later in life through intentional self-reflection and especially through a psychotherapeutic process. Inferiority feelings. This is, if you hear of the expression inferiority complex, this came from Adler. This was Adler's, really what he thought of. And as infants and children, we notice we can't do what big people can do, and we just naturally do feel inferior. It's the nature. We can't do anything by ourselves when we're very small, and we eventually gain more and more capacity. So it's part of our human condition. We all feel a felt minus, and we still do. Unfamiliar situations, unfamiliar kinds of things, we can feel that very much. And it's our innate desire to move to a plus position that marshals us, that moves us into action. Adler says, the power of life, which expresses itself in the desire to develop, to strive, to achieve, and even to compensate for defeats in one direction by striving for success in another. This power is teleological. It expresses itself in the striving after a goal. And in this striving, every bodily and psychological movement is made to cooperate. He felt very strongly that we have the volition to take whatever life has given us and marshal ourselves to move ourselves forward. Very different than like instinctual drives that somehow seem to manage us, as Freud thought. We can have an unhealthy application of inferiority also. An inferiority where we feel guilt or shame can really stop us, can keep us from really being as full of human beings as we may be. And this often happens if we try to hide our inferiority. So in our school, we have an expression, we have two expressions that are said a lot. The first one is the courage to make mistakes. And the second one is the courage to be imperfect. And because by acknowledging this, we take away a lot of that energy that's often deployed towards trying to hide our inferiority, trying to hide the fact that we make mistakes like everybody else. And by giving up a lot of that struggle, the energy's freed up just to be okay, just be human, and to not be hindered by that trying to hide our inferiority. And when healthy striving to superiority is discouraged, we can give up. So if people grow up in environments where they're really put down a lot, maybe by parents, other adults, that can also really hamper their growth and cause an unhealthy application of inferiority. If it's really in kind of systemic, it can be sometimes called an inferiority complex, and we may overcompensate, which can develop into what Adler called a superiority complex. This is kind of the situation where someone feels kind of really bad about themselves, so how they compensate, how they overcompensate, is to try to make other people feel bad so they feel a little better. That would be a very unhealthy application of inferiority, and which would be a superiority complex. A healthy application of inferiority, moving towards superiority, is to embrace our inferiority as a natural part of being human. The courage to make mistakes, as I said, our school motto, and the courage to be imperfect. And we move towards personal mastery, but this is a very key difference. Personal mastery is not perfection. It's very different. Personal mastery is about doing what we can with what we have and developing it as best we can so we can contribute to the lives of others in the world. Not so we can say we're better than somebody else, but rather so we can make a real contribution. So mastery is a greater contribution. That's the purpose of it. That's the reason artists practice their craft, why all of you that work for a living, you practice what you do to get good at it, so you're worth the pay that you're giving for your employer. Musicians practice, all these things. We move towards superiority in a healthy way in order to make better contributions. And Adler talked about this in terms of planes. If we were striving for superiority in an unhealthy way, it would be a vertical plane, like an elevator. Who is better than us? Who is worse than us? Who makes more money? Who makes less money? Who's smarter? Who's stupider? Who is, it's all this kind of things. And the trouble